there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to be doing something today that I don't think I've ever done on this channel before, and that is going to be some paper braiding. Now this is something a little bit different for me, but I did have a whole lot of fun, and I'm all about trying some new things on this channel and making sure that I kind of cover a range of card making techniques. Now, as for the pieces of paper here, the coloured cardstock, you could either create your own, or if you have some coloured cardstock lying around, even coloured paper is going to work really well for this because you will be folding it and bending it. I'm going to use a couple of pieces from this Playful cardstock paper pad, and these measure 8.5 inches long, but that's neither here nor there because we end up having to join some together. Some of them don't need joined, some of them are shorter. Either, just sort of have a play around and see how you go. As for widths, you can obviously do as you wish here as well. This is a personal choice, a personal preference, and I think when you start creating them, you'll soon get a feel for whether you like the thicker ones or the thinner ones. Or I'm going to show you a couple of different braids here today, and I'm going to start off with one, and I'm making those colored pieces 1/2 inch wide. I also need a couple of really skinny white strips, so I don't think I measured these, but I just cut out a couple of them since that's what I needed. Then from here, I know that kind of giving these instructions is going to be a little bit tricky, but I think these types of videos are the kind that you perhaps just watch several times over about a particular part when you come to that folding part, and hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea. I'm starting off here with a piece of the lighter blue cardstock, and I'm going to cut just roughly a little angle there on the end. Now this angle doesn't have to be measured, this just helps me kind of line everything up. Then I want some of the blue, the greeny pieces and 2 of the white pieces to go in the center of this braid. So that is how I'm going to measure where I need to make the fold. So I start from the bottom of that little angled cut, and then I know that here I'm going to angle this piece down so it kind of sits in line with all of those other 3 pieces, so all of them are straight, and that tells me where my angle needs to be and where my fold needs to be. So as I said, this might be one of those videos where you kind of watch it several times over and rewind, fast forward a little bit, and you will be able to get the hang of it. Then I'm going to fold this under again so it makes that kind of little pointy arrow, and then all I'm going to do is, this is where the pattern is going to start repeating itself. So I am going to fold over top here, again going downwards. You are aiming to create a 90-degree angle there, so it's kind of perfectly going across and perfectly going down. So as I said, just keep kind of going, and here is where we're at so far. And then as I said, this is where the pattern starts to repeat itself. This pattern does kind of curl up on itself a little bit as you go, but honestly, once we add in the other bits and pieces, it is going to be fine. Now, I don't really measure things. I don't really use any straight lines. Perhaps if you needed a grid mat behind you, that might be helpful. I honestly just pretty much wing it, and it does pretty well. I am just eyeballing to make sure everything kind of looks straight to me. And as I said, it turns out okay in the end. I think paper braiding is quite tricky unless you really do measure and make all those perfect folds, but I guess I'm a little bit too impatient for that. I just really enjoyed the paper braiding process and having fun along the way. So you can see how I'm going. I'm heading down to the bottom, and my little piece of paper here has run out. So all I'm going to do, this is going to work out pretty well. I'm going to hold this to the top of my page here to make sure I have the angle pretty much straight. That's about as good as my measuring gets. Fold this piece underneath, and then this is where I'm able to make a join, and nobody will end up seeing this. So if you have, even longer pieces of paper, then that's great. If you have shorter ones, honestly, most of the time they can get hidden and nobody is going to look that close anyway. So all I'm doing is just joining it on like it was carrying on, and then I will keep going with making this piece. I use liquid glue so that I can get it in place, but I'm sure that using some double-sided adhesive would work really well. As also, just make sure it's nice and strong, although this isn't going to be pulled apart or pulled on or anything when it's down on the card, so it doesn't have to be insanely secure. You don't want it falling apart, that's for sure, but any double-sided tape that you have is probably going to work just fine. So I'm going to follow the same pattern all the way down. I end up having to do one more join here just because I wanted this to go the length of my card, and I guess it's good to have something in mind where you want this to go, and then that way you can kind of know how long you need to make it or how far down you need to go. And this is the same pattern. As I said, it does curl up a little bit if you kind of let go of it, but that is all going to be made perfectly fine in just a minute. So I decided to stop here because this was pretty much as far as I needed to go. And this is where I'm going to take that green piece and start weaving it up and down throughout the layers. And as I said, this is going to help keep it straighter, and this is something that you can choose whatever colors you want to. They can be contrasting colors, they can be side by side, anything is going to work, and it's really fun to have a play around with which colors you would like to go here and the kind of patterns. I just went with this really simple pattern of the green up the middle, and then these two little white pieces are going to go either side of it. And that is as far as I'm going to take this one today. What you can also do is take another skinny strip and then pop it up the middle of that green one and kind of do the reverse weave of that, but I decided to keep this a little bit simple. And then this is where you can kind of move everything about and get it right in place, and then to hold it in place I'm putting a little bit of low-tack tape on the back, and that just keeps everything where I need it to be whilst I adjust it. Then once I'm ready to put this down on my card, I am just going to use a big long strip of double-sided tape, and as I said, I'm only going down the main portion of the pattern there. I've got all those bits on the top and the bottom that I will end up cutting off, but now we are going to work into turning this into a card. Now I am going to start off by just giving this a little bit of texture. So I'm taking this background stamp here, and this is obviously just sort of like a newsprint look. There's lots and lots of little words on there. They are not particularly readable. You can kind of read them, but once they are embossed, they're not really sort of for reading. They're more just to add some background texture. You could use any little stamps to do this. You could use larger stamps, but I am going to put this into my stamping platform, add some anti-static powder, then I'm going to be stamping in my VersaMark sticky embossing ink. This is one of the best ones that I have tried, and I have come back to this one time and time again. I cannot find any better. Then I'm going to make sure I get a really good print there. Then to add some embossing powder, I'm going to go with the white satin pearl from Hero Arts. And you could go with just white, you could go with even just clear. It's just about adding a tiny little bit of texture. I do like this one. It is a little bit pearlescent and it does add something a little bit extra. I don't have many embossing powders in my stash. This is one of the only ones that's kind of different, that is not just white or clear. And so this was just that little bit of extra that I needed. So you can see there when I turn it in the light, it just provides that little bit of background. I really do want the paper braiding to be the main focus here. I didn't want to take away from it at all. Then I have some of the Holtz frames. In fact, I think this is actually called the Labels set. I have had this one for quite a while, and I just die cut out a couple of those because I wasn't sure how many or what kind of look I was going for at the minute. And then I have the one-liners stamp set here. And one of my favorite things about this stamp set is that because when you stamp it, it's kind of solid black with the whatever color writing that you are, of the colored cardstock that you are stamping onto. So for example, this is going to be white writing because I'm stamping on white cardstock. Then it looks like, it gives the look like you have embossed with some white embossing powder, because this is a very popular look to kind of stamp onto some black paper in some white, some like sticky embossing ink, and then heat emboss it with some white embossing powder. And this just makes me feel like I am completely cheating the system and getting it done without having to do the actual embossing. So I stamped out the happy birthday to you, then I cut right around the outside so that there was no white border left, and then I snipped up all the individual words because I'm going to stack them on this little label die cut that I have, but any little shape die cut is going to work well, even circles, ovals, anything with a little bit of detail, or even just nice and plain to not take away from that braid that we created. And then very, very simply, I'm just going to peel off that double-sided tape there, and I was just deciding whereabouts I wanted to put the sentiment on the front. I'm keeping these cards very, very simple. I had a whole lot of fun with the paper braiding, and I didn't want to take away from it at all by adding a whole lot of bits and pieces. But that was just how I felt like going with these couple of cards, and I imagine that you could really go to town on these and do a whole lot of amazing things. So hopefully this video just gives you a little bit of inspiration, and knowing that you can do these when you look at them, they are not tricky or hard. Sometimes I take a couple of pieces of practice paper, just copy paper until I think I can get the folds right or it's going how I expected it to go. But this was really, really fun, and I'm really glad I did this. So all I'm going to do is pop the sentiment right down in the center, and this is this card finished. It looks very simple, I guess, but I think the braiding really brings it to the next level. For the next card, this one is also super, super simple, even more simple than the one we've already done, and I'm just going to create little, I think these are 1/4 inch strips, just whatever you like. Thin strips is going to work, but you can also do really thick ones as well. The widths are in paper braiding are kind of up to you. I did decide that I would do a few different ones, so I'm going to do the kind of greeny blue one like I did before, and then I'm going to do oranges and yellows as well. But just to run you through this, I'm going to connect 2 of the kind of greeny ones up the top, and then I'm going to take the liquid glue and add the blue ones going either direction as well. Now you want to line up the strips of paper so that they are right next to each other and not crossing over or anything, to the best of your ability. Honestly, I find that there's a little bit of flexibility in the paper braiding. You can kind of make things go how you need them to go. And then this one is kind of like traditional braiding. So you take the outside one and fold it in so it lines up with those other 2. So you have 3 coming down nicely. And then you are going to go to the other side and pull this one across. And this is going to line up nicely with the other blue one that is already there. This to me just feels like plaiting, which we call it here in New Zealand, or braiding. So very simple, just the outside one comes in on one side, and then the outside one comes in on the other side, and then back to the start. The outside one comes in on one side, and then the outside one comes in, and all the time I kind of don't worry too much about getting it really straight up the top. I'm just trying to line it up with the strips of paper down the bottom. So I mean, you want to keep it as straight as you can, but I feel like kind of sometimes what will be, and I just wanted to really enjoy the process rather than worrying about utter perfection, which in card making is really hard to strive for, and it works out better for me if I don't aim for perfection, but I just aim to have fun and enjoy what I am doing. So I'm just going to kind of speed this up because it is the same thing over and over again. If you want to extend your strips out, you can do almost exactly the same thing and just glue on a little bit more, or use some double-sided tape to add more length to your strips, or just start with longer ones. I guess that's going to work as well. But you can do this with any kind of cardstock, preferably not too thick. I found the thicker it gets, the trickier it gets to kind of fold them without getting cracks or creases in the paper. But use what you have on hand. I'm sure you'll have something that is going to work really well. If you have been inspired by today's video, then I would love to see your creations and your versions of this, anything you were inspired by, and the best place to do that is over on our Facebook group. This is my favorite place because I get to see all of your artwork that you have created. We have an amazing, amazing group there. There is so many supportive and just really like-minded craft people. We are very, very, very lucky. So I will leave a link to that down in the description box below. I will leave a link to any supplies that I have used in today's video, but for the braiding in particular, you can pretty much use what you have on hand, but I will leave a link to the other bits and pieces that I have used in these cards if they are still available. Other than that, with this one here, I created a few of these simple braids and popped the double-sided tape on the back. Sometimes I was able to cut some off and use it in a different place. And occasionally when I cut this off from the back here, there would be like a loose piece left hanging, you know, something that didn't have adhesive behind it. And I just used a little bit of liquid glue and was able to pop it down in place. Now I cut this set here kind of has like a larger and a smaller of each of the labels, so I was able to cut one of both sizes, and I'm going to use exactly the same sentiment. I'm going to pop it in exactly the same way, just to keep it nice and simple, using some liquid glue to pop them down. And then this one I'm going to pop up on the white, just because this background is fairly bright and a little bit busy. That's why I wanted to give it that white little border there with the second label. I am going to pop this layer up on a little bit of foam tape, but the braiding already has a little bit of dimension to it. These still fit in an envelope really, really easily, so I wasn't worried about that at all. I'm going to pop down this layer, and then the blue layer I just decided to put down nice and flat. I don't need to pop that up as well, otherwise this would be a super dimensional card. This piece that I started with I think is 4 by 5¼ inches, so I'm going to pop this down onto a 4¼ by 5½ inch card base, just so that it has that gorgeous white border around it. These cards are both super simple, but I had a whole lot of fun creating them, and as I said, something just a little bit different for me, which I really enjoyed doing. So I hope that you have enjoyed watching this video. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of the support, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!